Okay, let's go. Hi, welcome back to Listening with me, Christie Long. I am excited. I don't know, excited is not even a big enough word to describe my feelings about today's guest. Just as a little bit of background, when we first conceived of doing a podcast about the stories in veterinary medicine, specifically the veterinarians in veterinary medicine, my guest today is the first person who came to mind. And there's a lot of reasons that I could cite for why that is the case, and we'll be talking through some of those today. But probably the biggest one is that until I met this person, and I guess it was 2021, I thought I was the only software engineer who decided to become a veterinarian, and it turns out I'm not. I'm not that special or unique. That's why I'm so excited to have today's guest on. Today's guest is our lead doctor at our Glendale hospital. He started with Modern Animal in 2021 at our very first hospital in West Hollywood and has grown tremendously through that time to become not only an incredible clinician who, is incredible at practicing medicine. His clients love him. His team loves him. He's the star of our Mic'd Up series on our social media channels. Welcome today, Dr. Stephen Brookenthal. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
Hey, thank you so much. I got to tell you, I am a huge fan of this podcast. When you told me I would be a guest on here, I was so excited. Thank you for having me.
I talked a little bit in the intro about, how you and I both started as software engineers and ultimately came to veterinary medicine. And in my first episode of the podcast, I tell the story of how I decided to go back to vet school after 13 years of being a software engineer. And when you and I met, and you probably remember, we were having lunch at Mendocino Farms, and I was such a neophyte to Los Angeles at that time. It was when I was recruiting you to work for us, and I thought Mendocino Farms was this little boutique sandwich and salad place. I didn't realize it was a massive chain at the time. So I'm just going to go ahead and cop to that. But I remember you and I were sharing our separate stories about how we decided to become veterinarians. So, I'd like to kick it off and have you explain this to our audience. Tell us your journey to veterinary medicine.
Yeah, I feel like looking back, there were several points in my life where I'm like, oh, my life could have changed at this point. I was one of those kids who always loved animals, like
Sure.
probably almost all of us in this field. Um, and I was never allowed to have pets growing up. I was,
Wow.
yeah,
Why?
I mean, I had I had a goldfish that I won in a carnival that
That
lived
count?
for like 11 years or something. Like I kept it alive forever. So that should have tipped me off.
Well,
But I
that's
don't know.
obviously a sign. Yeah. You
Right.
you keep a goldfish alive for 11 years. Absolutely. You're gifted.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was born with magic veterinary hands. And then I went to school. I went to my undergrad at Michigan State, which has a wonderful veterinary school. Um, but I had no idea what I was doing, and I remember walking from my dorm to the engineering building, and walking past the one of the well, I think it was a large animal building, and hearing like horses in the background, and thinking like, oh man, that would be cool. I could be a vet. That would be a fun job, and did not. And I went and I studied computer science and engineering, and became a software developer, which was not the right move for me at all.
It was gaming software, right? If I remember right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
eventually I chose the coolest possible career in software engineering. So I became a video game programmer, and did that for about 5 years. I look at it as like a childhood, one of those like childhood dream careers where like
Totally.
you're a little kid, you're playing video games, like, yeah, I can make these. And then realized it wasn't for me, and then eventually transitioned into a different childhood dream career in veterinary medicine. But there was one night in particular, I was laid off from a video game industry,
Oh, wow.
which is a common part of the video game industry. Um, so I was in a layoff period with a bunch of friends who were also unemployed, and we were all out. We went out one night. Uh, uh, we were in LA. We were having a great time. We came back home. We were continuing the party at home. My friend had, I think, four cats at her house, and I remember just sitting on the floor, uh, with a little too much whiskey in me, and these kittens are just climbing all over me. And I had like an epiphany at that point, like, this is what I need to do with my life. I need to find a career where I can sit on the floor and have kittens crawl all over me. And
Were they literal kittens, like, or were they like
I,
adult cats? Do you
I,
remember?
I, it's cloudy in my head at this point, but they were small.
With
They
you.
were definitely small cats. They were not, yeah. So, so I woke up the next morning. I remember being really hungover, but having that clear memory, like, how do I do this? Like, how do I navigate my life so that I can be a veterinarian? And then I worked on it. Very lucky to live in Los Angeles, close to Pierce College, which is a community
Right.
college that has a working farm at the school, and so it was just a great place to learn. I had to repeat all of my prerequisites and then go on to veterinary school.
Yes, I at Pierce College. I feel like I know so many people who started out their like path to vet school and thus veterinary medicine at Pierce College. So shout out to our friends for an amazing program there. How did you ultimately find your way to Modern Animal and to all of us here who love working with you?
Thanks. This is another kind of meandering story because I feel like Modern Animal like reached out to me multiple times
Hmm.
before
Good.
I actually followed through. It's almost like a biblical story. Like they knocked on my door three times, and then the third time I was like, okay, I'll see. But the first time, it was at the early COVID. Um, we were still, everyone was still working. Veterinarians were still essential employees, so I was still working at that time.
Right.
Um, I was scanning the Nextdoor app, and someone was giving away Figs lab coats. And I was like, "Oh, I need a new lab coat." And it was my neighbor. They lived like a walk from my house at the time. So um, walked over there, stayed 6 feet away, and there was started chit chatting. The guy who lived there was a vet tech, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm a veterinarian. Where do you work?" And he's like, "Oh, it's this new place. We're actually not open yet. This was." Uh, the building was there. This was John Beener,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
technician,
Shout
one of
out.
the first
Yeah,
technicians.
an
Yeah.
OG West Hollywood alum. Yeah.
hmm So he happened to be my neighbor giving out this lab coat. I took it. I'm like, hey, where are you at? And he said, oh, this place not open yet. Modern Animal, it's called. They have this weird like concept, and he explained it to me, and I said, that makes zero sense.
Wait,
Good luck to
wait,
you.
what was it specifically that made no sense?
Well, like the business model of, I think at that time it was like $100. It covered all of your exam
Yes.
fees. Um, and I think that alone, I was like, how do you, how does that work? How do you stay, like, how are people not just totally taking advantage of that? But um, I thought, good luck. Let me know if you're looking for a job in 6 months, and I got a spot for you. Seem like a good guy. Anyway, about 6 months after that, I had a client who needed a health certificate to go to Hawaii. We're still in COVID. He it's like VIP, had a house in Maui. He just wanted to move his family there and ride out the storm of COVID. Um, but his previous veterinary clinic had shut down, and I happened to know one of the veterinarians who worked over there, so I gave her a call. This was Dr. McNeil,
Ah,
another OG veterinarian from the West Hollywood Clinic, and
who you met at
asked her,
Pierce College, I believe, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. But yeah,
that's right.
wow. Yeah.
That's right. We met at Pierce College. Yeah, small world. Um, so I asked if she, had any idea how I could get any information about this health certificate for this guy. And she said no. And we were chit chatting. And I'm like, where are you working? She said, oh, this place called Modern Animal. And I said, oh, yeah, I heard about that place. Good for you. It's still around. I'm like, how does it work? Are your checks clearing? And she said, yeah. I'm like, how does it work? She's like, well, the finance guys say it works. So, okay, if the finance guys say it works, good for you. I'll be around, if you need a job, I'll be here. And then the third time, I don't know, it was a couple, maybe a month or two after that. And that was either you or some recruiter contacted me, and I thought, all right, I got to find out what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I met
Pretty.
you, and you sealed the deal at Mendocino Farms.
Yeah, Mendocino Farms and ayahuasca. Apparently, that's what it takes to get somebody on board. Yeah, that's incredible. I don't know if you're like me, because I don't think we ever talked about this, but when I was practicing, I remember thinking, man, the technology I am using is so bad. I have all these different systems I've got to get in and out of. My practice was on Cornerstone, which famously is still a product, a practice management system that is client server based, which I don't even, there are probably people alive who are adults now who'd never even heard that term, but that was cutting edge in the 90s, I guess. But I just remember thinking this industry needs a reboot in technology. How did you have the same kinds of thoughts when you were first out there before Modern Animal?
Yeah, exactly the same thought. So I didn't want to say the name of the software that I was using, but you outed Cornerstone, and that's what we
Yeah.
were using too. Yeah,
Oh,
and
I
I just
know that.
remember working with it, thinking like, this is really not great software. Like there are things that I need to do that in my job that people have done for 30 years. This isn't new technology that I need. I just need things that are working right. And there's no way to get in touch with anybody at that company to
No.
like let them know what's going on. Um, and so actually when I was thinking about joining Modern Animal to go back there and talking to Dr. McNeil, I was shadowing her one day, and she said, "Listen, I'm not supposed to tell anyone this, but the engineers at Modern Animal are working on their own software, their own medical record software." And that was one of the key reasons that I joined Modern Animal. I'm like, how can I make how can I help make something that I can actually work with?
I
Um,
don't know. I don't think I knew that ever. You're telling me stories I've never heard before. Here, I thought it was lunch at Mendocino Farms with me, but it was actually, Claude, which is what you're referring to, our practice management system. And so, yeah, what a great evolution to the next part of our story here as we're chatting today. You were on board when we switched from, we were using Vetspire at the time, and I don't know, for listeners who aren't kind of as familiar with veterinary medicine, the practice management system, right, is it's the hub of everything you do. It's where the medical records for the patient live. And it's just you can't do anything. You can't write a prescription, without that kind of software. You can't document the exam that you did for the patient. You're taught in vet school a specific process for how you create a medical record, and that's what the practice management system does. So for us at that time, we had already built an app that people used to book appointments, to track their pet's health history. It's what our doctors use to communicate back to the clients and our teams, also our virtual care team. And then we had this other piece of software, this other practice management system that was, created by a third party company. And so there was a moment of realization where we realized, if we continue to depend on this third party, we're just not going to be able to move as quickly, right, as we need to. So that was the impetus for creating our own practice management system. And I remember the engineering team worked on it for about 6 months and then rolled it out. And so you were there for that rollout. Talk a little bit about what that felt like, because it's literally like flying an airplane and kind of changing the wings midair when
yeah,
you do something like that.
yeah, it was something. It was, uh, I talk to people who are joining Modern Animal now and who are using the software right now, like if they there's always something that could be improved in software, and so people are always making recommendations. But I'm like, man, you were not there in the early days. Like the early days were I gotta say were they were rough. They were rough. It was exciting to be in it, but it was also like things were changing every day and changing so quickly that it was hard to keep track. And the software itself was buggy in similar ways that I think Cornerstone was, except the nice thing was we knew that there were people who had our backs who were working on it while we were experiencing these bugs. So um, it wasn't like we would complain about it, and those complaints would go off into the ether. But I do remember like finding something that didn't work very well, knowing exactly how to repeat the bug because that's what I'm trained to do. So I would make sure that the bug was repeatable, and then I would write up a ticket, send it to the engineering team, and then they would respond. And usually they're like, "Oh yeah, that was a really good catch. Like, thank you for that." And they would know how to fix it, and then it would be fixed. But there were some rough days during those early times when like you'd
There were
finish
some
your
dark
medical
times.
record. What's
Yeah.
that?
I just
Yeah,
said there were some dark times for sure.
there were some very dark times. But I mean, it looking back at it, well, um, I feel like the veterinarians who are still at Modern Animal who survived those dark times were stronger for it.
I think that which does not kill you makes you stronger. Absolutely. I remember we ultimately started calling this problem Claude ate my homework, right? Remember?
Yeah.
And in the early days, in the effort to have a piece of software that is continually saving your work, right? You and I, as prior software engineers, know that that's just kind of it was table stakes for this piece of software, right? Because you're working on the patient's medical record, you want to be sure you don't want to have to be pushing buttons all the time to make sure your work is saved. And in the process of implementing that, because it wasn't part of the original design, if you remember correctly, we started using Claude and people were like, hey, I've got to have this has to be continually saving. And so in the effort to make that happen, sometimes massive amounts of the medical record would just go away. And that's, as a veterinarian, you're practicing, you're doing your craft. The software is just supposed to work. It's just at minimal, it's supposed to keep what you put in. So yeah, you mentioned a minute ago the people, the team who was back there working on the software and having access to them, and not only were they responsive, they were always very, very sorry and felt very acutely, the pain when something didn't work right. And yeah, I remember one time we had a real bad problem with Claude eating homework, and I had this brilliant idea because Claude, by the way, is named after the veterinarian from the 1600s in France who started the first vet school. So I thought I am going to send all the veterinarians at Modern Animal, which at that time there were maybe six or seven of us, I think, and I'm going to send everybody a bottle of French wine. But Brookenthal, I'm going to send him a bottle of cognac. I don't know really why I thought that. And do you remember it was like maybe a year later when you said to me, yeah, you actually sent me cognac flavored vodka and not cognac. And I remember thinking, wow, this is like a really good price, $20 for a bottle of cognac, turns out.
I remember you bringing it up like it was a while after, and I'm like, do I say something?
Yeah.
Do I tell her it's not cognac? Because like I'm like, I mean, she's this is my boss, but I'll let her know. And I think at that time, I don't think I even tried it at that. Like I saw it on the label and was like cognac flavored vodka. I'm like, I'll save that for special occasion.
Oh,
That
oh.
sounds real nice.
Yeah,
But
the parents have to be in town to pull that out or something.
right,
Yeah, yeah. No,
right.
thank you for telling me. It's one of my prouder moments for sure. So I remember another time when you and I had been talking, and you told the story a couple minutes ago about like finding a problem, writing it up, making sure the engineers knew about it, doing the work to reproduce it, which that in and of itself is such a critical part of software development and design, because without that trail to the problem, it's really hard for the engineering team to find the problem. And you knew that, intuitively as a former software engineer. And I remember you started talking to me about this idea that you could do more, right? To really be a part of the design team. I feel like all of our like really meaningful conversations, Stephen, are held over a meal or a coffee. I remember I went over to where you live, right, which is like Los Feliz area, Glendale.
Silver Lake, yeah.
Silver Lake, you were in Silver Lake at the time, yeah. And we had a coffee, and you kind of had this proposal around how you could play more of a role. So I talk a little bit about that and like how we started out and where we are now with how we involve doctors and team members in the development of software.
Oh, is this like, are you talking about like Claude Counsel with this
Yeah,
or?
yeah,
Okay. So, the the original thought was just having sort of a liaison between the medical team and the engineering team. Uh, some person or people who could kind of help the two sides understand what needed to be done, like what was really important and um, what maybe we didn't need to focus so much attention on, and ultimately that turned into something called the Claude Council,
yeah,
which was a collection of people in different positions in modern animal. So some technicians, some veterinarians, um, working directly with people who are involved in software making. I think that came about once Pei Chin, our chief product officer, joined Modern Animal.
yeah.
Um, and I think it was really beneficial. Like there was immediately the big problems that we had. I remember the biggest problem I had at the time was I would get back to my desk, I'd start typing into my record, and then I'd realize actually the record that was open was one from 3 weeks ago that I was just looking at prior to coming in, and I completely destroyed my previous records with a new
Oh,
one.
wow.
And I had been asking for somebody to please make our records lock so that we can't type in them after we sign them out. And I think that was one of the first changes that came around from Cloud Council was, okay, now I can't be the villain in my own story. I can't destroy my own records. Um, but that was really really helpful, and for a long time it was great. I no longer am a part of the Cloud Council. I feel like my responsibilities at Modern Animal keep getting greater and greater and greater, and so um, I'm stepping away from certain parts of it. But it was for a long time like a really really nice way to spend some time, and I think we made like a lot of progress with
Yeah,
Claude. Yeah.
we did. And I think, as Claude started to become more and more functional, it really, because at the beginning it was just me, right? It was just me talking to the engineers about how the software should work. And, as the company grew and I got further and further away from clinical practice, like I'm no longer the expert on that. Somebody who's in it day to day and using it, whether that's a doctor or a nurse or the person who is at the front desk in our hospitals, which we call the host, right? Or the virtual care team who's using a totally separate part of our system to chat back and forth with people, to do video calls. Those people have a better perspective on how the software should work. So that I think is one of the things that makes us, I mean, in general, the amount of technology we develop and build at Modern Animal is something that makes us different, but really involving the medical people in the development of the software is truly a differentiator for us, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's really important. This was part of our conversation that I think we might have had at that dinner in Silver Lake was this the people who are in the clinic who are involved in this developing the software. We can't take them out of the clinic to do this because I remember thinking of a role where I have a background in engineering and in veterinary medicine, so I could be working in the office with the engineering team and crafting some stuff, but you can't really take me out of the clinic because I still need to be working with the patients and the clients and the software and the team. So it can't be done by someone who's outside that role. It has to be someone who's really an insider to help make that software work for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think? I mean, obviously, we're all talking about and using AI now. I mean, and I always tell people when I talk about Claude, there have been times over the last 6 years when I've thought that was a really bad decision that we made to write our own practice management system, just from a sheer standpoint of the scale of that project, right? And to your point around how do you really make it authentic and work for the people who need to use it every day. But since AI has become such a reality, I now know that that's one of the best things we ever did, right? Because we've been able to quickly put a lot of AI features into Claude And I'm curious, as you're looking around at the job you're doing day to day, what do you think the big tech problems are that we still have yet to solve in veterinary medicine?
Yeah, I think AI is, we're in a really interesting time right now with AI. So I think it solves a bunch of problems, and the tools that we have now, I think, can be really, really helpful. I think, like anything else, when you introduce something new to the situation, it adds additional problems too. So one of the things that I think we did a good job with is we started moving along this path of integrating AI into Claude, and then we found some areas where we actually needed to pull back a little bit, where we were
Right.
maybe over relying on AI. So part of what we do, and the reason that you hire us and smart people like us is, um, uh, for decision making and understanding how to, you know, look at a set of information and problems and diagnose and determine next steps, right? And so the dream of AI is that AI is going to be able to do this for us. Um, and what we found, at least in 2025, is it's not that good at it yet. And so that part of it, we still need a human being to work with. So we had a feature where the AI would look at our notes, and it would come up with a list, or it would look at diagnostics, and it would come up with a list of differentials for us. And what we
Right.
found is that it just isn't there yet, and it isn't able to organize thoughts the way that people do yet. And a big problem I had was we were just hiring a brand new grad who came right out of vet school, who was starting and really needed to learn, okay, take this information, put it in your brain, you know what to do with it, or you're learning to know what to do with it. And if this doctor looked at her screen and the AI printed out, here's your list of differentials, a seasoned veterinarian would look at that and say, that's wrong, and I'm going to type in what's right. But a brand new grad looks at that and says, I mean, I guess I remember learning that. And so I think we took a big step backwards from that idea. Now, things are changing so quickly that who knows, maybe that will turn around, and maybe at some point that will be more helpful. But I think that there's a lot of nuances, and we have to be really careful when we're relying on technology. Um, the great thing is, I think that our engineers and our product team are really aware of what a precarious situation we're in as as leaders in medical technology.
Yeah, I loved your voice so much in the development of the feature. I think what you're probably mostly referring to is the AI aided diagnostic reporting, because and this is to me where just the benefit of having someone like you on the team who understands the software side and the medical side is just I can't even measure it. But you were very adamant by saying, like, look, I have this new grad and they have to build the muscle of understanding what's true and what's right. And if we give them a tool and just say, you know use it, they don't learn that, and so their clinical decision making is clouded by that. There's a paper that came out a couple months ago by the American. It was written by the folks at the American Association of State Veterinary Medical Boards, and one of the things that we're still waiting on in veterinary medicine are the laws that are for sure coming, right, about how AI is used in veterinary medicine. I'm sure every meeting of the California Veterinary Medical Board, they are talking about AI. They are trying to figure out, do we need to regulate this? How do we write this into the professional code? But one of the things that the paper really highlighted is if you're going to use AI to create medical records, and you and I both know we're using it now to capture the audio in the exam room that's spoken and then transpose that into the medical record. We're using it for quite a few things. But if you put it in the medical record, the doctor is still responsible for what the medical record said, just as if they had written it completely themselves. So that you can't use AI to create anything that the doctor can't review and modify and change. So that is just it's going to be such an interesting time to see, what plays out with respect to the regulatory environment around this. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more to come, right?
Yeah, we're just at the very beginning right
Yep.
now. It's very interesting. I remember in my engineering classes at Michigan State, we all took an engineering ethics class, and I talked to Stephen Eidelman and Pei Chin about this in a meeting with them. But I remember in my engineering ethics class being very nervous because we talked about cases where engineering errors um, caused by or created by humans that caused death, really serious problems because of a mistake that an engineer made, and that's almost part of the reason that I went into video games because I'm like, there's not a whole lot that I can screw up in my job that's actually going to kill a human being, um, and I really thought like, yeah, okay, I'm probably not going to use this a whole lot, and now here I am where I'm like, oh yeah, if we do this wrong, like if we screw up, there are serious consequences. So um, that feature I took really seriously, and I wanted to make sure we did right by our members and our patients.
Yeah, you did a 180 in more ways than one, right? You went from video games, which, the worst thing you can create is a teenager that never leaves their bedroom, versus, you got lives at stake, right? Every day, everything you do, is related to taking care of and saving lives. It was interesting for me as I made the transition from, the software world to the veterinary world around, I guess, just what was expected of me when I became a veterinarian. And look, I worked long hours when I was a software engineer. Like, I probably put in 60-hour weeks in most cases. But I remember they said to us at graduation, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I thought about that a lot when I was practicing. Like, you just give, you give your life to this profession in so many ways. My husband made a comment one time when we had to pull the car over because there was a stray dog, and I always, you carry a leash in your car, you carry treats for that moment when you got to get out there. And he said, he was telling somebody that story, and he was like, it's kind of like being married to Superman, or Superwoman in my case. You gotta be aware that there's a greater and higher calling. So I wonder if you ever had any moments like that it dawned on you as a veterinarian that what you were doing was just it was just such a different proposition than what you had as a
Yeah,
software engineer.
yeah, it's interesting. I was working, so I was when I was in the video game field, there was a big class action lawsuit against the giant video game publishers because employees were being overworked and not getting compensated for it. And so I was working, late nights and weekend hours, and um, I would come home like really like 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, or 10 p.m. let's say 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I'd come home. My roommate would be sitting on the couch smoking a joint, and I'm like playing. By the way, playing my video game, playing a
Playing your
video game
video
that I
game.
made. Yeah, and I'm like, this is what am I doing this for? Like,
Wow.
this is not a rewarding life at all. And so, but no, it's a blessing and a curse. I feel every day. Yesterday, I was telling you I had a really pretty intense day yesterday, but at the end of the day, at least for me, like when I go home, when I get in my car and drive home, I feel like, oh, I did something good. Like I know that there are people who I helped, um, and I can feel good about that, um, which is really, really nice. The flip side is, I lie awake at night sometimes thinking about patients and thinking about maybe things that I could have done or said differently, and maybe would have had a different outcome. So I agree with the calling. Like I do feel like this is a career I was meant to have, and it's something that is so much a part of my life that it's almost hard to separate um, uh, my life from the career. Uh, and I don't always think that's a bad thing. Um,
Yeah.
I'll say as a second career veterinarian, uh, I think I have a different perspective in this career than maybe some people who are coming straight through, you know, undergrad straight into vet school, straight into their career. Um, but I found something that I love and a job that's very rewarding, and um, that I think is like the most important thing for me.
Oh man, you're so right. And I've met new grads in this field who that I don't know what to call it, right? Other than just like this almost this weight of like responsibility. And I remember being really hard on myself when I first graduated. And, it's like the joke is like I lay awake at night and think about your pet at no additional charge, right? Like we're all doing that. But at the end of the day, like you have to give yourself grace. You have to know you did the best you could with that pet in that situation. And oh, by the way, there's this other person that's involved, the owner, who you cannot control, right? You can't make them spend money on an additional test or a medication. You definitely can't control what they do at home, whether they give the medication or not. And so I think, when I meet new grads who are almost paralyzed by this like heavy weight of responsibility of taking care of pets, that's the first thing I try to tell them is like, you have to give yourself a break or you'll never make it in this field, right? You'll just burn out so quickly. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you saying that.
it's nice. Now that said, when I was fresh out of vet school, I was just riddled with anxiety, and fortunately made it out the other side without burning out. But it's true. Like we all need to give ourselves some grace.
I'm so grateful that you did make it out, Stephen. I don't want to we're almost at the end of this conversation. The time has gone so quickly, but I don't want to. There's a couple more things I want to hit on because they're so important. You have you have been on a leadership journey these past 2 or 3 years that I'm gonna be really honest with you. I don't know that I recognize that in you at the beginning, and
Yeah, neither did I.
well, I
You
think
and me both.
I think that's true, right? I think you came to that realization, and I won't claim that I was, the one who said Stephen Brookenthal, he's our guy, right? But like you have you have just impacted so many other lives by being a leader. You have a team at the Glendale Hospital where you've mentored and grown those doctors. I'd love to hear from your perspective, like how did you have that realization and how did you do it? How did you make the shift from being a solo practicing doctor to a leader of doctors?
Yeah, this is I mean, there's a real story that I could tell, which I'm going to tell right now, but
Go.
it's
Yeah.
not pretty. Um, yeah, I was working at the West Hollywood Clinic at Modern Animal at the time, and living in Glendale. And for anyone who knows Los Angeles geography, that's those are not close to each other. I mean, they're probably realistically they're probably like 5 miles away from each other, but it's like a long 5 mile. It's a
Yeah.
long drive to get
I
from
mean,
one
West
place to the
Hollywood
other.
isn't close to anything except West
Right.
Hollywood, right? Yeah.
Right,
It's hard to
right.
get
It's
to.
like an island,
Yeah,
basically.
it is.
Yeah, yeah. So I was working there, I as an associate doctor, and I heard that Modern Animal was opening a clinic in Glendale, and I thought, oh, I need that. Like, I'm signing up to transfer over there. As soon as that opens, it's 3 minutes from my house. Like, how do I make that happen? And so I put in my transfer, and then I got a invitation to meet with the area medical director of LA, Dr. Hamilton, and Dr. Hamilton basically said, "Hey, we don't, you can't leave West Hollywood. We don't have doctors here, but we need a lead doctor in Glendale. Like we have enough associates. We don't have a lead. You can join Glendale if you take the position as a lead." And I honestly, I thought about it for a little bit. I'm like, I don't know that I can do this. But so it's not like I had this moment where I'm like, I never had this moment where I'm like, oh yeah, this is for me. I'm a leader. I'm gonna take on this role because this is who I am. I took it out of convenience, really. But what happened was, I started the position. I think I also had a child between the time that that I made that decision at the time that the clinic opened. And so I think it was 3 months. My son was 3 months old when I actually started the leadership position. So, I mean, leading up to that, I was going to meetings. I was learning about like, changes at Modern Animal, how we do, basic like leadership training at Modern Animal. Um, uh, Once it opened, I was getting no sleep and I was starting and it fit. Everything just clicked. And we had an amazing team to start. Um, Really, I, I think I want to give most of the credit to the team. But I know that like it's hard work and I'm so grateful to be doing this job with the team that we have. Um, it's not something that I originally chose, but looking back, I'm like, it's a no-brainer. Like, obviously, this is a great position, and I'm so happy that I made that decision. Even if it wasn't for the best reason, I'm so happy that I made that decision because I love this role that I'm in right now.
You're so good at it. You have an incredible partner too in Bren, your clinic manager over there, and yeah,
I
I,
couldn't do it without Bren.
I mean,
Bren's amazing too, and the two of us, I think, our leadership styles just mesh perfectly.
yeah,
Um, it's been a really great ride. I think we're looking almost at 2 years of
yeah.
Glendale being open, and it's just been so much fun, and just is yeah. I'm looking forward to the future. It's just been a great ride so far.
I think that people assume veterinarians are good leaders just because of you're the doctor, right? And you have to make multiple decisions every day, and it's not necessarily an innate talent to be a leader of people. It's something that you have to learn and get good at. But I think you have a natural gift for it, Stephen. So I'm so pleased to have you in that role.
Thank you so much.
It's been great. You just touched on something that's one of the last things I want to talk about in terms of the things that you and I have in common, and that is we became parents very late in life. I had my son on my 39th birthday, 5 months before I started vet school. You and Shelly had Levi when both of you were in your 40s. And parenthood is hard enough, but to do it at a time in your life, which, I mean, come on, we were in middle age. They called me obstetrically geriatric at the time. But at the same time, there is a grounding aspect of that, right? Of being a parent and having perspective. Talk a little bit about how that's impacted you.
Oh man. Well, like I said, the Glendale Clinic opened 3 months after my son was born, so I was on like basically zero sleep. It was a really rough time to start. Um, and I feel like as he's been maturing, I'm maturing with him. It's interesting. Um, he's we got really lucky. He's a really great kid. He's happy. He's fun to be with. Um, he makes my life so much better. But I think before he was born, I mean, there's kind of like I think it's almost a cliche that people say it's like the hardest job in the world, but it's really the most fulfilling thing. And I feel like I every day am learning so much from him as how to be not just like a father and a leader, but just like how to be a human being and like
Wow.
how to treat people. It's he's my son now is almost 2 years old, so I'm not like a veteran parent. I still feel like I'm learning, and maybe I will feel like I'm learning for the rest of my life. But
You will.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's such a fun ride. Like life has been full of like you know changes and 180s, and uh, that's kind of the fun in life is just seeing what you can do and learning and overcoming and achieving, and it's uh, I wouldn't have it any other way.
So true, man. I've got 20 years on you in the parenting game, but he still teaches me things every day, and I think one thing, yeah, I agree with everything you mentioned. I think patience too is something, and maybe you had naturally more patience than I did, but like kids are their own special sauce. They obviously have your genes, but they're their own people, and just like having the patience to watch that evolve and let them become their own person, I think is that's probably one of the toughest things that for me as a parent a challenge has been. But I also wouldn't have it any other way. Your son is also one of the most adorable children I've ever seen, I have to say, and
Thank you.
I'm a completely unbiased observer, so.
I can't argue with that. It's true.
Well, I want to close with one final question, and I want to set it up by saying I love going in all of our hospitals. They're all the same in a lot of ways, but they're all totally different. They all have their own culture. I love coming into your clinic because that your team has so much happiness and joy around the work that they are doing. I think are you 8 years into being a veterinarian? How long have you been a veterinarian?
I can't do math. I think it's 8 years.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
eight.
eight years. Yeah.
You've seen the same things a number of times. Who knows how many ear infections you've treated? Where do you continue to find your joy in practicing medicine?
Um, you know, I think yes, I've seen probably hundreds of ear infections, done spays and neuters hundreds of times probably. I don't know, but there are always new things to learn, not academically, just in the interactions with my team is just they bring me joy. Like my team is ridiculous. And I'll give you a little story from yesterday. I'm sitting at my desk. I've got and there's a lot going on. I was telling you before this, I'm training people. I've got surgery going on. I had a upset client that I needed to call. So there's a lot building up, and then I'm sitting at my desk working, and I hear out of the corner of my ear one of our technicians who will remain nameless say, "I really have to fart, but it won't come out." And that's all I need. Like one of those every day at work. I'm good. I'm good.
I think we are a profession that overshares on a routine basis, right? But that's what makes veterinary medicine special. That's what keeps everybody coming back every day is the ability to laugh and make fun of ourselves. So I love that. That's awesome. Well, the time has flown by. Thank you so much, Stephen, for taking the time to be our first guest. I have enjoyed the
Thank you.
conversation immensely. I cherish the ability to work with you on a day-to-day basis. It's been so fun chatting. Thanks so much.
This has been great. Thanks a ton.